Hi, I'm Murad. My interactions with DWP first started after I got my diagnosis of autism. That was in early 2014. I submitted my application for the personal independence payment on the advice of my psychologist, and the paperwork all went in. And that was in May that went in. I actually had to reach out to my MP because it took far longer than the time period described in the paperwork for them to get to me. I was actually assessed in February of 2015, and this was only after my MP chased on my part. I was awarded the personal independence payment on the enhanced level for daily living allowance, and it actually did change my life. It meant that I could afford a car of my own, which meant that when I was going to all my appointments, and I had many at that point, I didn't have to do public transport, which meant I could actually manage a lot better before and afterwards. So when the alert for reassessment arrived in November of 2017, just 2 years later, I was undergoing assistance from the crisis team of the Mental Health Team West in NHS Cait-sîth, and thank goodness for them, honestly. I completed the paperwork and submitted it. Whilst I was waiting, I got a further clinical report, so I submitted that, which they denied receiving. And then I moved home. My assessment was then held in July of 2018. The assessor that arrived, who was more than 2 hours late, which is the worst thing you can do to me. I can't stand it. I plan my day very heavily. It's very, very regimented and very, very scheduled. So I discovered only later that this person was a paramedic. They weren't a mental health professional. They weren't anyone that would have any kind of prolonged interaction with someone with mental health issues or as someone with autism at all, which was very disturbing. So when the report came back in August of 2018 and I was told I was to cut £100 almost immediately, the only things that had changed in my circumstances was that I was now single and on one person's income. Arguably, I was worse than when I was initially assessed in February of 2015. My mental health was worsening. My symptoms were barely manageable. I was hardly getting by, having gone through a great deal of trauma. So when that came back, I followed the instructions on the paperwork. I submitted a reconsideration request, and instead of having the options described to me, I was pushed through this on the phone. I'd never been through this process. It's the 2015 assessment was my first ever assessment, so I didn't know there was processes and that I could have stopped and gotten help, because if I had, I would have. So instead I had to do it all on the phone. No options were described to me. The call handler, when I was taking her through why I was disagreeing with the report that had come back, she was actually so concerned for me, she arranged to call me back later to check in on me. She was concerned for my safety. So then another report came back, and this was appalling, utterly dehumanizing. I'll quote directly from the report that came back. There are some triggering language here. You have suicidal thoughts and self-harmed, but not by overdose. You take appropriate medication. You attended the assessment alone and appeared well kept. There was no visible scarring to your arms or legs. Mental state examination shows that despite being tearful at times and appearing tense, low in mood and motivation, I did not appear overly anxious or distressed. Now that's the assessment of a paramedic. I was in distress. I was stimming, I was rocking backwards and forwards. I was crying. I'm 34 years old. And I was clinging to a teddy bear during this interaction with this assessor. So what on the surface she decided, and being a paramedic, she would see things in the worst case scenarios. She saw me in meltdown, and in her eyes that wasn't overly anxious. It absolutely was. So basically, because I was clean and had no bleeding wounds on show, which if you self-harm, you don't do that. You don't do it in anywhere that anyone could possibly see. It's not how that works. And anyone with even a minuscule of understanding around mental health would know that. So I was rejected again, and I was utterly devastated, and I actually had to go off sick work. So it was affecting my capability to do my job, and I was off sick. The next and only redress in this process was to go for a tribunal, during which process the DWP lost paperwork. They lost the additional report that I submitted whilst I was waiting for my assessment. They also managed to fail to find attachments from my community psychiatric nurse who helped me through this process, who's been a saint, and thank goodness for the NHS, Ms. McVey, which your party and government has seen fit to try and take apart piece by piece by piece. Thanks for that. Really good of you. So another part of that process was 169 pages of paperwork. Big wodge. It was like someone had sent me a proof for a novel in which the person was beating me up. The tribunal was cancelled and then rescheduled, and it was all absolutely terrifying, intimidating, and I have no idea how I got through that. To this day, I have no idea. I attended, and having been misadvised by Welfare Rights, who appealed on the basis of food, which wasn't the issue here, Welfare Rights sent a different person to the assessment, so not the person that I met with. And they reappeared after the tribunal did their reconsideration, and I was advised that they were rejecting my appeal and that they did not think I should be in receipt of anything at all in terms of personal independence payment, in spite of medical reports and proof of everything that I'd been going through being right there in front of them in black and white, and the living, breathing human being being in front of them in black and white. They also made it clear that if I took it further, that they would be removing all of my personal independence payment in its entirety. I was terrified. Again, I was kicked back down, and DWP robbed me of my health for the second time within a year. The process is broken. The process is not fit for purpose for mental health. There is absolutely no way that people with lifelong conditions should be reassessed, early or otherwise. My autism isn't going to go away. It just isn't. That's what's so galling. Having suffered and believed I was broken for years and years, and being failed to be picked up because of basically being female. To have this was just yet another straw that broke a camel's back in what is already a challenging existence. And I imagine that people with lifelong conditions continuously undergoing reassessment, in this case, in my case, within 2 years, That's a waste of money. That's a waste of resources. And an unnecessary and undue stressor for the person going for the award. I'm aware this video is long, but this is how long it takes to tell my story and to document on camera as succinctly as I possibly could what was going on for me. Just even rereading that abusive language and dismissive language around mental health when it's supposed to be a priority. It's heartbreaking. Esther McVey, you don't want to help people like me. You want to get the numbers down, so you're arbitrarily slashing away and hoping people don't appeal. I appealed, and I appealed again, and I went to tribunal, and I was threatened. You're horrendous. Your department, you've led a department that is disgusting. Sorry, I really did try to be short here, but there's so much to say. Sorry.